Hi, this is Yanis from Noisebud, and today I'm releasing version 1.6 of Sub, and it looks like this currently. I've been adding features and I've been squashing bugs. There was a bug that made some settings go back to the default setting once you reopen a project. That's a horrific bug. I think I got that sorted. And there was another bug that randomly could make the boost settings, even if they looked right on the screen, the settings just disappear from the right channel of the stereo signal. That's also horrible. That I don't think that too many had that bug, but still, it needs to be fixed. Shouldn't happen. And then there was a lot of other small issues and fine tuning of things. Then I added a threshold control for the shape function. So now it could pretty much be a plugin on its own. As it is, but it's good to have in this plugin as well. So it's there. I added a delay for the trigger signal, and I added, I think, did I add the attack in the last version? I don't know. The attack in the boost section, I think that's new for this version as well. And I changed some things in the oversample menu. As you can see, you can no longer choose the filters. I decided to go with the filters that works the best in each situation. You don't need to know about those things as a user. It just makes the plugin harder to use and harder to test. So now the broadband clipper and sub dynamics, they run on the highest FIR filters, the steepest ones, and the detector runs on a much less CPU hungry oversampling algorithm because it's not needed for that. And it sets by default, so you don't have to worry about that. You just have to set the amount of oversampling that you want. And another thing is in this plugin is that I haven't had any issues with aliasing, even though if I don't oversample. I usually oversample anyways, just because I want to get rid of the possibility of creating aliasing. But that's more of a safety thing than that it actually affects the audio. And there's a high pass filter, and this high pass, well, I'm gonna explain what it does later on. Let's start by just showing you how I would use. I made a little loop or a couple of bars of techno house things that has a little bit too much low end, and I will show you how I would approach that using sub. Then after I showed you that, I will start to show you how to use sub in creative ways and in different ways. But this is just first as the most, because sometimes we overdo things in plugins when you just actually need to maybe just put a plugin on there to do what should, and that's it. You don't have to do anymore, and you're done. But the risk is that we sit and tweak forever when it's just not necessary. It doesn't make things better. So in this case, I'm gonna play you the intro of this track and a couple of bars. So here we go. As you can hear, this sub was bypassed. It wasn't activated when I played this. There is some kind of a mastering chain, a quick mastering chain. Let's show you my main screen. Here we go. So I have a compressor, I have BX Master Disk doing some EQ work, nothing much else. I have a copy of, or a remake of the Sonox inflator, and Timeo Stereo 2 doing some clipping and stuff, and then a gain meter, and that's the mastering chain. And then I have a EQ that I'm gonna show you how I use this in this context, and then there's sub, but both of those are inactive right now. Normally when I get a track like this, which already probably sound the way the client would like it to sound, it sounds good. There's two places in the loop where the low end gets it's too, the peaks are too high, which will make, if you're listening in the car or listen on the club, it will, there's a risk that the subwoofer will start to make some distortion. So that's pretty much the only thing that I would like to control if I was mastering this. Because it's bass heavy, I know that the client wanted to be bass heavy, so I wouldn't try to limit it too much. I would just fix that little issue and go on with it. So the way I would approach this is actually that first I would boost. In this case I use Rust and EQ from Acoustica. It was just the first EQ that popped up when I searched for an equalizer. So it's not intended to, it could be a Pultec or whatever, whatever you like to use. So I boost 50 Hertz with 2 decibels. And after that, I'm using sub, and I'm not using it dynamic mode. I'm using it with the same settings for a whole track. I use the shape control to add a little bit of transient on the kick. I leave the boost alone, so it doesn't do anything. It's 12 o'clock, it's neutral. And then I put the P control down to, yeah, right about safe, or between safe and standard. And that's it. So let's listen to the part where the low end is a bit too much and see how this sounds with it activated. And actually I'm gonna toggle between these two, bypassed and activated. So keep an eye on the left here, because I'm gonna use a key command to bypass both of them at the same time. So there we go. As you can hear, the things that I'm doing, this is below 50 Hertz, and I pretty much just put a limiter on everything below 50 Hertz. And for this demo, this would be enough. This is what the track needs to be, yeah, to work on club systems and stuff like that. So that's all I would do. That's pretty much not a lot of settings at all. It's just pop this in, put the P control on safe, and then you're ready to go. Well, with that said, let's start to dig into how you can use this plugin and what the different controls are. And I'm going to talk through every control once again, even if I did that in the last release as well. But I think that if new people come and use this, it's great to have one video that just show you everything with it. So let's go. I'm gonna remove that Rust equalizer, and we're just gonna focus on sub. So yeah, we can actually go back to the cutout screen for a while. So we just have a look at the settings. The two most important controls are the Boost and the peak control. These are the core of this plugin. Those are the two settings that you use the most. And yeah, first you set the, let's just in short tell you what this plugin does. It controls the dynamics and the energy in everything that's below the crossover that you choose with the crossover. So works on subharmonics or sub frequencies, and it's meant to be a simple tool to gain a lot of control, more control than you normally have in the sub region, because it's a bit hard to control low frequency, especially if you don't have speakers that go down low. So the idea with this plugin is just to make it easier and to collect everything that you need in one plugin. All right. So first, the boost control. This is if you put the peak control on stupid, that is pretty much that you don't limit the low end at all. Then this become low shelf, which is neutral in the middle, and you attenuate everything below the frequencies that you put in the crossover. So everything below 70 hertz right now, and you boost if you go to the right. You can view it as a simple EQ. I also like to call this the floor, and the peak control is the ceiling. The peak control sets a boundary. It's kind of a clipper, compressor, limiter thing. So it just forces the audio to stay below the value that's set here. I could have put decibel values, but since it relies on the whole spectrum, so it's dependent on the signal that goes into the plugin. It's hard to call it like -6 decibels, because it really depends. If standard, that is I think it's 3 decibels below the peak level of the whole spectrum. So if you set it as standard, that's 3 decibels below the combined peaks of the whole spectrum. So it forces every peaks that's below the crossover to a lower value than the peaks for the whole. And if you're down on the woods or safe area, that's just, you won't have any issues if you put it there, but you may also kill all energy in the low end, so it won't sound good. It will work, but it won't sound engaging or good. The normal is that you probably are on the right side. You probably are on easy now, so you let some peaks go a bit higher, and then you probably don't boost things that much below. That will sound the most natural. That will probably sound the best in most cases. But if you get a track that's pretty weak in the low end, and when you raise the low end with say an equalizer, and you realize that this doesn't, the information that's in the low frequencies of this mix, it just doesn't sound good, then you may have to go down a bit with the peak levels of the low end and boost it with the boost control. So you pretty much force frequencies into the clipper thing, and by that you limit the dynamic range of the low end and control it. And that will work. You can, in some cases, it sounds really good, but it will always work, and that's pretty much the idea with this plugin, that you can play it safe, or you decide for yourself where you want to put yourself. A bit risky, but sound better, or safe, and maybe sound a little bit more boring, if you like, not as interesting. Okay, that's the peak and boost controls. Then we have the whole dynamic section, and that I started to do that because if I had a track where I wanted to boost the low end, maybe I wanted to be creative, so I boosted the low end by much. Then there's a break or a build up in a break or something, and I boost the low end by maybe 12 decibels in the track, and that will boost the low end in those passages as well. And it didn't sound good, so I wanted a way to filter out when the track isn't playing a lot of low end, like kick drums and bass and stuff. So just pretty much wanted something that if the low end is not that intense, then I want the dry signal. I don't want to do anything with this. So the dynamic section mix between a dry version and the wet version of the signal. And then when I did that, that was just the first use. Then I realized that I could do a lot more creative stuff with the dynamic section, so it kind of grow and become something, yeah, what it is today, which is a bit more complicated. But let's start just by make settings so that we can make the plugin inactive when it plays the intro. And let's go back to the main screen. So you see that you pretty much see that where I put the marker there, that's where the kick hits and starts playing. And before that, it's just intro. So we don't want to we don't want to affect the low end pretty much in the intro. We want to leave it as it is. So we're gonna activate the dynamic section by hitting dynamics. Then just in this case, we just want to activate the plugin as when the kick starts. And we do that by setting the threshold. So we're gonna do that first. Okay, so with the settings I made right now, we can see that the signal stays below the threshold, which is put right there. And when the kick hits, it will go over the threshold and then activate the plugin. Let's actually do some crazy stuff. Let's add a lot of low end when the kick hits. There we go. So that's the most easy function of the dynamic section. You can see when the meter of the release that shows you when the signal is wet. When the signal is affected by the plugin, then you see a meter here, and the more it goes to the left, the more the dry signal. And when it's not present, when you don't see the meter, then it's the dry signal. So you can look at that again. Let's make everything a bit faster. So we're gonna put the release to the fastest, attack to the fastest, and we're gonna recalibrate the meter by using the adjust. And let's explain the adjust button as well. It's just like an automated gain control for the incoming signal. So let's say that let's take away the level of this. So it's this low. If I hit play, this signal is really low and you can't see it on the meter. it's really hard to set the threshold to any meaningful point. So that's where the adjust button comes in. When I press that, it will measure the signal and it will set it, pretty much normalize it. So let's do that. Now it's normalized to the present level, the current level, and now you can see the meter shows you the signal, and you can set the threshold in a meaningful way. Let's go back to the original level and adjust it again. Now when I hit play, it's gonna be all red because it thinks the signal would be, yeah. Oh, my camera went away again. I really need to buy a new camera. Let's skip the camera and do it like this. As you can see, I adjusted the level to the original level again. So now we can set the threshold again. And yeah, there's a couple of settings. The trigger signal, that's what you see in where you set the threshold. You see that in the meter where I point my pointer, my mouse. So if I slow that down, let's have a look at that meter when I raise the release in the trigger section. As you can see, it moves a lot faster when I have a slow release. So that's because it starts to follow the peak level. It's a peak follower, so it's just follow the peak of the signal. But if I increase the release, it will take longer for it. When it will have a quick attack, but the release is really slow. So then it will have a slower movement, and you can use that in different ways. One way is that you want to you want to isolate the kick drum, for example. So let's do that using the trigger release. If you look at the meter behind the release control in the boost signal, which shows you when the signal is wet or when it's dry, you can see that I now have isolated the kick, and everything that I do with the plugin will just affect that kick. That's one way of do this. We can also set the release to very quick, and we can have a slower release in the boost. That will make the signal go from wet to dry in a linear movement, which may sound better sometimes. You have a bit of the same effect, but the curve will look different. They work in kind of the same way, but think of it as you changing the curve. With using the trigger release, you can have a much faster release in the boost, and by that you have a much, when the thresholds go, or the signal goes below the threshold, the release is very quick, but you can still keep the signal above the threshold as long as the kick plays, for example. So that way you have you can have a very exact control over the shape of the release curves. And the attack and delay. It's called delay in the trigger because this actually delays the signal. I probably made it a bit too much at the max position. This is 500 milliseconds. I don't know why you would want to delay the trigger signal. But delaying the trigger signal will sometimes you can do some cool stuff when you want the plugin to be triggered a bit after the initial, in this case, a kick in this track. Let's play around with that setting a little bit and you can see if you can hear what it does. And actually you're gonna have the high pass on when I demo this. And let's put a crossover at 100 as well so it's easier to hear. Let's do that again. So that's the delay of the trigger signal. The reason why it's there is I mastered a jazz album and I didn't want the low end to start because at the same time as the transient hits, because acoustic instruments usually don't work that way. You have an initial transient and then the actual tone of an instrument or a floor tom or whatever it is comes as a bit delayed. They come a bit later on, and you can simulate that with the delay. You can also use the attack, but exactly the same thing with the trigger signal release and the boost release, or the release in the boost sections. It's the same thing here, that you can create different kind of attack curves, either in conjunction with the delay and the attack, or using either of them to achieve pretty much the same thing. But they will sound a bit different. Both will delay the low end. Yeah, that's the dynamics section. And let's go to the high pass that I have placed on the output section here. I'm actually gonna put another color for the output section, probably another color for the dynamic section here as well. But I haven't done that yet. So you have to read the manual or watch this video for now. The high pass. The high pass will, this is like you can see it as a dry wet control for a high pass. So it works almost like a attenuation with a low shelf kind of thing when you're not at 100%. And with this to the left, it's just off, so it doesn't high pass anything. But this is a high pass of the dry signal. So if you use the dynamic section, that means that you can high pass everything that's not when the signal is not above the threshold. When it's below the threshold, that will be bypassed. This is a really cool function because then you can, I actually added it because I had a techno project in for mastering last week, and they had a sine wave through the whole through one of the tracks, and it was pretty constant, and they have a kick that, well, was pretty much the same frequencies. And the comments I got back when I sent it away, the first revision, the first master, they said, can you make the kick a bit louder? And I couldn't really do that because it's I mean, they was exactly the same frequency band. Then I figured out that, well, okay, if I use sub and I use a high pass for the dry, then I can make the dynamic section react to the kick, and then I can attenuate what's between the kicks. And by that, I could make the kick stand out, and I could tame the things that are between the kicks a little bit. So if we put, I think that master ended up with the high pass on pretty much 50%, so it didn't cut away all low end between the kicks, just a little bit, and the dry wet control was a bit, 50%, 50% or something like that as well. And by that I could make the kick feels like a kick, but without losing the low end of the sine wave that was playing. So that's how that came about. Yeah, let's see, we talked about all those things. Let's talk about the shape control. I have a new threshold. In the former version, we used the same threshold. It would copy the... Yeah, that's what the shape control does. It will copy the shape of transients from about 80 to 250 hertz. It will copy the shape of that and apply that to the transient 1 octave down. I created this because in, again, acoustic music, it felt when you boosted something heavily with sub and peak control it, it almost sounds like you're adding a sine wave. It doesn't do that. It uses the information that's in the signal. But it sounded like a sine wave because it was so heavily controlled. And it didn't sound natural. It didn't sound like a contrabass and a floor tom on the drums. So I needed something to make it sound more natural, and the shape control does that. It changes the attack to something that sounds more like the actual recording, and applies that an octave down, so it's still in the sub frequencies. You can see, if you can hear that, it can be hard to demo this. It will play a lot of low end when we do it. So let's see, how should we go about this? Yeah, let's do it like this. I'm gonna put it in delta mode, and I'm gonna play a section, and then we're gonna raise the... Let's play this section. You're gonna raise the shape control so you can see how it sounds. I don't know if you heard that. You have to experiment with it, but it changes the attack of the sound, the shape of the transient. And it does that no matter if the dynamics are activated or not. It does that all the time. And it actually removes the settings in the... As long as the transient plays up to 100 milliseconds, it will remove the boost settings as they do that. And then it will leave... then it will fade over to the boost setting. So it's as soon as you activate this, you will affect all the attacks of the low end. So just be aware of that. It can create some modulation distortion in some situations. If you have a break in a track with, let's say, a sine wave or a bass sound that's playing long notes, then you can hear that it starts to modulate sometimes. It finds fake transients. And yeah, be aware of that. So listen to sections like that if you want to use the shape control. To be safe, you should automate it. So you just use it where it's sounding good. That is pretty much this plugin. I'm gonna do a session where I'm just playing around with different settings to see what we can do with this track. And let's go back to the kata section, and yeah, here we go. Playtime. as you can hear, you can do a lot of fun stuff with sub. You can change the feeling of the low end without ruining it or make it sound unnatural. It's a really fun plugin to dive into. So download it. It should work better now, and please report any bugs as normal. And with the next release, I think I will add a section where you can adjust the high pass filter that actually is constantly activated right now, because it's set very low. It's just taking away the like rumble at 10 hertz and stuff like that. But I think it would be a good idea to be able to turn it off or adjust it so you maybe work with music that don't need anything at 30 hertz. Then why not be able to high pass stuff? So I think I will add that. And I would try to do that without making it heavier on the CPU. So download this, have fun with it, and I will see you with the next fun update or plugin or whatever I come up with. We'll see. Have a good evening and a good weekend, and I see you soon.